I hope everybody can hear me. Yeah, you guys can hear me. Okay, growth comes from change. The biggest challenge you all will face in your lives will revolve around change. In fact, these moments will be defining moments in your life. Furthermore, your success depends upon your ability to change. Unfortunately, our system, our education, doesn't actually teach us how to address change. And that's something that we all need to worry about. The last time I was on this stage, I was handed a piece of paper, and with a firm handshake, I was sent off into the world. Armed with 4 years of engineering knowledge, I thought, okay, this is it. There's going to be lines of employers, wanting to design the next generation microprocessor for them, to design the next mobile network for them. Do you guys think it went the way I thought it would? That was 16 years ago, by the way. I think it's important to understand the nature of change and how we fit into it. We are all walking a line. Without an exception, we are all walking that line. It's something that has been set for us, either by society, by culture, by the authority figures in our lives. This is what you need to do. And it's important to have that line. It's important to have direction. It's the comfort zone. It's the stable state. But what happens when things don't go according to plan? Change. Change is murky. It's uncertain. There's turmoil. You don't see beyond that cloud, that fog. But you need to get through it, because then you will probably end up somewhere of many possible end states. And then you will need to forge another line to follow, another steady state. And the challenge is actually, how do you navigate that cloud of change and land on a spot which you're comfortable with, which takes you onto the path of success? So let's take all of you, actually. You guys were born, then the nurse, she picked you up, brought you to your parents. Your parents took you home. They raised you, they fed you, they clothed you. They taught you what was right, what's wrong. They guided you. And I think all of us will remember, son or daughter or child, study hard, get those grades in school, then you'll get into the best university, and then life will be set. And once you're in that university, study hard, get that GPA, you'll get a good job, and then life will be set. And then hopefully you'll find the spouse of your dreams, or whatever dream that everybody has. And I suppose many of you are standing on that stage right now. There's that cloud of change which is coming upon you. Are you guys ready for that? As an example, I was reading a report yesterday. McKinsey, a world-renowned consultancy, basically says that by 2030, 375 million workers will need to find new skills to adopt if they want to stay gainfully employed. That sounds scary, doesn't it? So the next piece of insight that I will share is success actually comes from change, and all true success is actually change. And a classic example is Nokia. So I want to say that the principles or the ideas that we will discuss today could apply to organizations as well as individuals. And since I have a background from telecoms, I like to give this example. So everybody knows Nokia, right? It's that phone company that no longer makes phones anymore. So if any of you read any material from MBAs or management consultancies, they like to quote Nokia as an example of a company that didn't manage change. But I like the Nokia example, but I think we have to look a bit more deeper into the Nokia case. So Nokia was actually founded in 1865 in Finland, and they started out actually making pulp to make paper. That's the first thing that they did. 1865, 2 guys in Finland, in the middle of nowhere. Then they decided, let's go into rubber, because there was a guy who wanted to use the river that they were making that pulp right next to them, and they got shares in the rubber factory. And they started making rubber boots, actually, galoshes, as they say. And then because they were in rubber, they decided to make tires. And this is now, we're in the 30s and 40s, 1930s, 1940s. They've also made toilet paper, by the way. This is the 1960s. And then they got into electricity, and then into making telecom equipment in the 70s. And then, of course, we know they made actually one of the first portable mobile phones. So, of course, definitely, if you look at Nokia in the short time horizon, there's a change that they did not expect, and they did not foresee, and they did not manage. But if you look at their history is actually growth. They've changed, they grew, and there was one change at the end they did not foresee, and they were not able to manage, and as a result, suffered. So, that's a company, right? How do we as individuals grow? And I think there's this one study that I want to share with you, and it's basically about the growth mindset. So there's a professor out of Stanford, Carol Dweck. She spent decades actually studying how children learn. And based on that study, she coined the term the growth mindset. And what this basically is, it basically juxtaposes two ways of looking at learning. There's the view that I have talent, I was born with it, and that's it. I can do so much with it. And then there's the opposite view, that I'm constantly growing, that talent needs to be developed. So that's the growth mindset. Of course, she studied children. Right now, this study is also being applied to corporations, as well as career progression as well. It's also important to note that these aren't fixed states. So it's not like I have a growth mindset and somebody else has a fixed mindset. It's a mode of operation. It's a tool that you employ in certain situations. So a fixed mindset isn't necessarily bad. When you're on that comfortable straight line, it's okay to have a fixed mindset because you don't really need to worry about things which are happening too far off towards the horizon or towards the side. But when you actually encounter change, that's where the growth mindset kicks in, and that's when it becomes valuable. The growth mindset has certain attributes, and these are summed up basically here. So as an individual, I can either embrace challenges or see them as hurdles, something to worry about, something to avoid. And with those challenges, if I want to overcome them, I have to work hard. Hard work is a key belief in the growth mindset system. Effort is essential. You are also receptive to feedback, whether you like it or not, and you use that to actually grow. And you see other success as inspiration rather than a source of insecurity. So these were the attributes that were summed up quite nicely by Carol Dweck as part of the growth mindset. So at this stage, I should probably give you some examples of world leaders, business leaders who've adopted these principles and gone on to do wonderful things, and I can definitely do that. You have Steve Jobs, who was fired from his company and then ultimately came back and took Apple to where it is today. You have Jack Ma, who was basically an English teacher in China, and now look at Alibaba. It's going to be it's actually one of the most valuable companies already in the world. You look at Branson, serial entrepreneur, airlines, media. He's looking at space tourism now. And even at home, look at our current prime minister. Cricketer, who during his cricket career actually changed his bowling style, grew from that, became a philanthropist, became a politician. Do you recognize any of these traits in these people? What it would have actually taken to actually do the things that they did, the transitions that they did? And those examples are inspirational. But I think it's also important to look at people who are much closer. Because the tendency when we have these lofty examples is that we see them as far removed from ourselves. We need to have something closer to home. So let me pick up on that story that I started in the beginning, 16 years ago, right? What did I do? So I graduated. I actually got a fairly well-paid job. It was interesting, but it wasn't fulfilling. I didn't see myself chasing after people, getting contracts signed, sending off faxes, making sure bureaucracy was working. That wasn't what I was interested in at the time. So after a year in the telecom industry, I decided I need to go back to school. I became a student again. And actually, it wasn't that easy because I got a scholarship. I moved to France. I learned actually a new language in order to do a master's degree. But I did it because that was something that I needed to do. It was a change that I needed in my life. I went on to do a PhD. Again, that was something that I chose. That was a change that I needed in my life. But then I had gotten that through my system. And then I completely changed and went into management consulting. And that was another skill set. So with a PhD, no business background, no MBA, I became a management consultant. I was working on basically in the era of the financial crisis in 2008, advising banks and insurance companies on managing risk. I actually worked on a very big global case of a bank shutting down in Switzerland. And all of those experiences I got because I was willing to change. Along the way, my publications have racked up more than 1,000 citations. I've learned 3 new languages. I worked and lived in 8 countries. And of course, I could list my CV and my career on and on, but you get the idea. Although success has other factors, I do believe the ability to change is necessary for you to grow and thus achieve success. And now I've given you examples of success or change that I've initiated myself. But then there's one other type of change that is much more difficult. And that's change which you don't see, which actually hits you right in the face. What do you do then? It's not rocket science. It's a step-by-step process. The hardest part is actually learning to accept change. This is probably the hardest part. Again, I don't want to go into details about the stages within this, but there's shock, there's denial. But ultimately, you have to accept that this change is here and it's here to stay. What are you going to do about it? And then it's a matter of just breaking it down. Usually, this level of change comes with enormous elements that you need to cater for, but then you have to focus on key things. And then the next part is also quite hard. And that's basically the first step. You know what you need to do or the different things you could do, but what do you do and how do you do it? And then it becomes easier. Then you take baby steps. So let me give you a personal example. 2 years ago, we lost my father. It was quite sudden. It was quite soon. I was living in Norway at the time, professionally doing well, personally doing well. I had a house, I had a mortgage, and this hit us all of a sudden. And for a month or so, I was basically in denial, in shock, basically. It took me quite a while to actually accept the situation. And then once I had accepted it, I had to then break it down into what was important. And then when I was able to choose, yes, my personal life or my family is the most important thing, it became much easier. And then I took the first step. And that was basically saying, okay, I'm moving back. And once I made that decision, everything else became much more easier. There were just baby steps that I needed to take along the way. So after I moved back, I started looking for a job. I got a job as well. Of course, emotionally, I was not well. I got better as well, being close to family. Professionally, I got to work with startups. I've worked with some of the best minds in Pakistan. I've had breakfast at Nanga Parbat Base Camp. I am a part-time entrepreneur with a couple of my friends. We have a dairy farm. Professionally, I'm looking after corporate strategy for one of the biggest companies in Pakistan. But you don't get that all at once, right? You have to take that first step to make it happen. And how do you make that first step? You have to be open to change. Growth comes from change. And I was like one of you, sitting in one of those seats 16 years ago. So if I can do it, all of you can do it. Growth comes from change. Thank you.